Joining me now in the studio is Fergus Finlay, Chief Executive of Barnardo's, and it is because Cardinal Sean Brady has said the Catholic Church plans to lobby politicians on the issue of abortion. Pat Rabbitte, the Communications Minister, said this would be a retrograde step. Well, is it a retrograde step, or should the church be allowed to lobby politicians?
Well, the church should be allowed to lobby. They should absolutely be allowed to lobby. I disagree with what Pat Rabbitte was reported as saying, but it isn't actually, unfortunately, quite what he said.
Well, what did he say?
Well, he said, I listened to the interview, and he said, first of all, he wasn't there. He hadn't come in to talk about that subject. He'd come in to talk about an entirely different subject, which, if my memory serves, is wind farming, or wind electricity. But the question was put to him about the Archbishop, what the Archbishop had said about they proposed to launch a campaign about abortion, and that they proposed as part of that to lobby politicians in their offices and so on. And Pat Rabbitte said that he thought it would be a retrogressive step if we went back to the days of bishops dictating to public representatives.
No, I listened to the same interview. I didn't quite hear him say that now.
Well,
come now.
That was the phrase he used.
You put a very personalised spin on what he said.
Well,
he was kind of intimating that, yes, that the church would be doing it like they thought they could do it when Archbishop McQuaid was around. But you're a lobbyist, and like this, you don't necessarily every day come on the radio or release your letters that you send. I'd say half the politicians who lost their seats in the last election are lobbyists, and they don't tell us what they're doing. Lobbying is part of the political process. So why shouldn't the Catholic Church do it?
It is part of the political process, and it got a bad name, George, as you know, for a variety of reasons, not one of which I would accuse Cardinal Brady of. I mean, Cardinal Brady isn't going to bring brown envelopes in with him when he goes to meet politicians. But the way in which lobbying did get a bad name was because it was seen as, in some circumstances, as an attempt to corrupt or buy politicians, or to coerce them or to frighten them. Now, I've been there, George. I lobby on behalf of children. I lobby anyone I can about aspects of public policy in regard to children. I do it openly. I do it in print. I never... nothing I say or do is ever done behind closed doors, and that's the way it has to be. No minister is going to keep something I say to them secret, nor should they have to. But I can remember in 1983 or 84, can't be exactly specific, when Cardinal Conway came in to lobby the then Taoiseach on the subject of divorce. And to say that he wasn't shy about indicating what he wanted done and what he was prepared to tolerate and so on would be, to put it mildly.
That's 30 years ago now.
It's 30 years ago. Before him, of course, and then he went out and, in fairness to him, gave a press conference on the steps of government buildings.
Yeah.
Sort of what he was saying. It was rather something of an elaboration of what he'd said, that he actually said to the media afterwards. But that's neither here nor there. Before him, of course, bishops and cardinals went into politicians in absolute secrecy, sometimes in the dead of night, or sometimes summoned the politicians to them and told them what to do, what to put in the Constitution, what not to put in the Constitution, and so on. Do you remember you wouldn't remember this, George, but there was a famous incident in the aftermath of the mother and child scheme.
What do you mean I wouldn't remember?
Well, because it's not widely known. In the aftermath of the mother and child scheme, Mr. De Valera brought in his own version of the mother and child scheme, and there was a public health bill that went hand in hand with it. And there was a little known provision in that bill that would enable the state to ban the importation of medical devices if they chose to do so. And that went unknown for years, and eventually some research was done into it, and it was discovered that Dr. McQuaid, then Archbishop of Dublin, had insisted that Mr. De Valera put that provision in the bill because the Archbishop of Dublin was afraid that Ireland might start to import an item called a tampon, an item used for what was politely known at the time as feminine hygiene purposes. And Dr. McQuaid was afraid that women, if they used these tampons, might get some kind of sexual pleasure from them. And he ordered the then Taoiseach to put a provision in law that would enable tampons to be banned, but not to tell anyone about it.
Okay, but I also remember around that period a different government, of which the Labour Party were part of, but the then Taoiseach of that government was John A. Costello, and I think he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think I've gist of it right, he said he was a Catholic first and a Taoiseach second.
He did.
Now, those were different times, and it would be wrong of Pat Rabbitte or you, although you're doing it in a more sort of circumspect way, to raise the spectre that the Catholic Church would be coming in telling some poor politician that he would roast in hell forever if he didn't oppose abortion.
It would be wrong of me to suggest that a bishop shouldn't be allowed to do that. I think a bishop should be allowed to do that, provided he does it in the open, and provided there's no secrecy about it, and provided that the world and his wife is entitled to know.
But the world and his wife now knows. Archbishop Brady has said,
that's good. That's healthy.
We will lobby politicians. But my issue is with Pat Rabbitte, not with the churchman, because the churchman has been open and above board and has said, this is what I'm going to do. And Pat Rabbitte said, oh no, I'd be worried about that. But Pat Rabbitte would be perfectly willing to take a deputation from you on children, from some other fella on the importation of motor cars, from some other fella, why would the Catholic Church be singled out for defending their
Well,
case?
I hope they wouldn't, provided that the same rules applied to everybody.
Yeah.
That's all that I would ask, that the same rules would apply to everybody, and that it would be added to the sum total of the advice that the minister got in respect of an issue. I mean, I'm fascinated by this in a slightly different level, because, for example, we are going to have a referendum in the autumn, and it's a referendum on the rights of children.
Yeah.
It's not a referendum on the subject of abortion or contraception or family planning or any of the other really contentious issues that we've talked about in the past. And I would love to hear publicly and out in the open the views of the hierarchy on that matter. And I'd love to think that, we would find an awful lot of common cause, particularly given the history in relation to children, that we'd all find a lot of common cause in relation to how we respect and protect children into the future.
But
I have to be honest and say, if I want to hear Cardinal Brady on that subject, well, then I have to listen to him on other subjects.
But just on this abortion thing, I was in Cong for the weekend, right? Celebration of 60
Not
years.
topless, I hope.
No, 60 years, The Quiet Man. But Sunday I'm driving back and I am experiencing something which was called mass traffic, mass with a capital M. There is a sense, I think, of belief that in Dublin 4 and the views of Dublin on conventional or conservative topics don't exist in Ireland anymore. I was in Claremorris a few months ago on a Saturday night, traffic jam after Saturday Mass. There is, and they are quiet and they are not vocal, there is a substantial proportion of people in this country who have conservative Catholic views, and they ought to be represented. I'm not one of them, but I wouldn't deny their right to be represented.
Well, I totally agree with that. I mean, there is what the bishops would regard as a flock, and people regard themselves as, open and amenable to the advice of the hierarchy and the bishops in relation to a range of matters. Now, I think that a lot of distance has grown in recent years between members of the flock and members of the hierarchy as a result of some of the things we have been talking about. And I think that there are an awful lot of people who still take their religion very seriously, who still go to Mass on Sunday, who still go to confession and receive the sacraments, but who increasingly regard it as a personal thing between themselves and their Creator, as they would see it, and are less likely to be willing to be led and said by people who've been involved in scandal and the cover-up of scandal in recent years.
Okay. A lot of texts to Sweet Cheeks because they know they're going to be read out. And in Bishopstown, well known to you and me, Sweet Cheeks, tell Mr. Finlay he must realise the Catholic Church has changed a lot since McQuaid. And of course, I'm sure he knows this. But what about Sweet Cheeks? Rabbit is permanently on RTE, and Finlay is permanently on Pinko Talk. You know what Pinko Talk is?
That's really, well, where are you, George? You're torn between News Talk and RTE.
All right. Normally I have lots of time, says Harry, for Fergus Finlay, but not this time. He's way out of order. 1983 is a foreign country. This is a different country. Fergus can't change.
But that's the only point I was making. That was the only point I was making. And I
suffer from the same disease, Harry says, as Gilmore and his mates. You hate the church.
Don't hate the church. Absolutely not true. I hate what some people in the church have done, both in terms of the acts that some people perpetrated and the acts that other people covered up. And I have been publicly, privately, as a citizen and as a writer and as a columnist, I've been very critical of what they have done. But my father died an ardent Catholic. I loved my father till the day he died, and I would never abuse the church that he belonged to or the faith that he had.
Text from Andy. George, are you a Catholic? Certainly not practicing, Andy, so therefore I can't call myself a Catholic. But when I went under the anaesthetic in the Bon Secours recently, I have to say that I rather quietly made an act of contrition, just in case.
I have a brother-in-law who fought in Vietnam for his sins many years ago, and he came back from Vietnam with the saying, which he used many times afterwards, there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole.
All right. Thanks very much. Fergus Finlay with me.